Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham.
Hello everyone and welcome to Road to Cheltenham. As you can probably guess, Lydia is recharging the batteries ahead of the big show next month. So it's Ruby Walsh and myself for this week's edition. Ruby, how are you? We're almost at the end of this particular road. Are we nearly at the cut-off point, do you think, for late festival clues?
I think we're getting pretty close, Gary. Thanks very much for joining us. But I do think that we're getting pretty close to the cut-off. Obviously, this weekend with Kempton, Ferryhouse and Naas, and Ferryhouse being basically a Grand National trial anyway with the Bobby Joe. But I think you're down now to inside 3 weeks. So I don't think there'll be too many more Cheltenham clues to come after this weekend.
Well, there were certainly a few last week. We've got a lot to get through. And I think there's only really one place we can start, Ruby, and that's with Shishkin's fantastic return to form in the Ascot Chase. Was this everything you wanted to see from him?
I think it was everything that everybody wanted to see, not just me. I mean, you get a great horse like Shishkin, you want to see him performing, and it looked like the step up and trip was the making for him. That was a solidly run race, Gary. I thought Pick Dory and I jumped out to go a good gallop, but what was noticeable with Shishkin was how much he was on the bridle. Second fence, he landed straight on it. Back in the third fence, Nico de Bonville was trying to slow him down, which was nearly unusual for Shishkin. Full flow fell at the 6th. Miller's Bank made a mistake at the 7th. Pick Dory picked the race up at the 8th as they turned away from the stands and piled the pressure on. But at the 9th fence, Shishkin almost landed upsides, and you're thinking, wow, Nico has no fears about this fella staying. He was bang upsides at the 11th, the last fence down to Swindley Bottom, and they turned the climb back up then, and they put the pressure on. Miller's Bank was beaten at the first one. Right was gone at the second one. Fakir Dudari was struggling by the third one. And you're still thinking, like, Nico, you're riding the fastest horse. But no, Nico just kept it so simple. Got upsides, picked Dory off the bend, sent him to the second last, piled the pressure on. And Shishkin jumped brilliantly and galloped all the way to the line. But I thought to watch him, he looked so much more comfortable at 2.5 miles than he has done in a 2 mile chase for a long time. And I thought it was a really good performance.
One thing just surprised me a little bit. That was that Nico de Bonville drove him out all the way to the line. Obviously, he wasn't too worried about maybe having the horse having a slightly harder race than was necessary. Would that be in the back of your mind at all, heading to Cheltenham next time?
No, I don't think it would. I thought, look, obviously Nico would be in Seven Barrows riding him out, schooling, etc. He'd know where the horse was in fitness. And I thought the way he rode him like he was getting a proper run into him or a proper bit of work into him even. He was going to open him up. And look, Nicky had from last Saturday 3.5 weeks then to allow him to freshen up and get him ready for Cheltenham. So it's an ideal stepping point or starting point for him as such, for a horse that's had such a light campaign. No, I didn't. I thought he squares him all the way to the line, and I think he might even improve for it.
Okay, and by all accounts, he has come out of the race pretty well. Not surprisingly, he's rocketed to the top of the market for the Ryanair on the back of this. And obviously, Allaho's absence has played its part in the shape of the way that this race is now looking. Is he basically gone by if he turns up in that sort of form next month, do you think?
How many horses have gone to Cheltenham that people thought were gone by and didn't go by? But look, he's definitely the one that sets the standard. He's entitled to be favourite, and he will take a lot of beating. Now, look, there is clamber in some quarters, people suggesting he should step up to 3.25 miles. I'm not so sure you could do that, having never even ran in a 3 mile chase. How do you jump from 2.5 in Ascot to 3.25 at Cheltenham? Had you run into King George, yeah, that debate could be open, but I don't think off 2 miles and 6 with a bit furlongs at Ascot, you could really expect him to go 3.25.
I'd say if all goes well in the meantime, every chance we'll see him in the King George, maybe on Stephen's Day or Boxing Day next time. Nicky Henderson, obviously, it was a wonderful day for him. He was a very relieved man after the race. And after the dust had settled, the following afternoon, he was at Newbury where he spoke to Jess Stafford.
Yeah, we talked this morning. I mean, obviously, the plan, I would imagine, will be the Ryanair come Cheltenham. And then I think, it's all very well talking what are you going to do in so many months' time. Well, you know as well as I do what could go wrong with a horse in 24 hours, let alone 2 months. But what you'd like to try and do, I would have thought, would we have a look at the bowl at Aintree over 3 miles. And then we've got something to think about in the summer. If he gets it, fine. we then couldn't even start to think about, that's 3 miles at entry. So it would open a lot of avenues.
And Ruby, when I said about Shishkin, had you seen everything you wanted to see? Probably not from the Willie Mullins point of view, though on the same afternoon, we did see Janadil making a fine return to form in the Red Mills Chase at Gowran Park. Just talk us through your thoughts on this one and the way the race shaped up. Obviously, Hodon Couleurs was favoured after his fall at Thurles when he looked set to win the Horse and Jockey Hotel Chase. Pleased with Janadil, no doubt, but were you a little bit disappointed with Hodon Couleurs?
Possibly, but pleased with Jonathan. And listen, I was at home watching Goran last Saturday, and I was listening to yourself and Jane, and you both thought he'd improve for their own. Well, so did I, funnily enough, looking at Jonathan the previous mornings on the gallop. But look, at the first fence, Capodanno made the run, and Jody McGarvey booked out on him. And he was really high at the first fence, really exuberant. Same again at the second. Capodanno gave it a lot of air, which is wasting energy really, but it was his first run in a while, and the race took shape. Horton Couleurs sat second, Darasso sat in third, and Janadil sat in at the back. And it looked to me like Rachel was riding like he might need the run as well. But Horton Couleurs, I don't think it was a mad gallop, Gary, and he got quite keen between fences 3 and 4. He really came alive, whereas he'd settled really well at Thurles in a stronger run race, going a bit slower here. He was alive and burning a bit of energy. And you could see it between the 3rd and 4th. And again, when they raced away from the stands, they head to the 7th fence. He was really alive in Paul's hands. Capodanno was only going so fast in front. But Rachel had dropped off him a bit on Janadil and looked like he had plenty to do, even at that stage on a slow pace. But the race didn't take or change massive for the first mile and a half. Capodanno's jumping got much better. By the time he got to the ditch in the back straight, he was down out of the air and attacking his fences. And as they climbed up to the 4th last, you're still thinking, well, this race hasn't really developed. Looking at Janadil at home and probably watching him in the parade ring at yourself and Jane, where you're thinking, he'll need the run. He's going to get a bit tired at some stage. But the sprint was on down to the 3rd last. And, Capodanno missed 3 out down to the 2nd last. Then Hawthorne's in front, or Horton Couleurs in front. He reaches. But Janadil quickened really well. Neither of them were spectacular at the last. But Janadil's turn of foot from 2 out to the last was pretty good, and he won snug, Gary. I think it was a good performance from him, and as much I don't know will Shishkin improve, but I definitely will be thinking Janadil's going to improve off of that.
Fair comment. And the talk before the race, Ruby, was about the possibility of Hodon Couleurs being supplemented for the Ryanair, but after he's been beaten, and obviously Shishkin is in the same ownership, winning so impressively at Ascot, would you think maybe that ship has sailed now?
Well, to quote David Casey, there was a reason I didn't put him in it.
It makes perfect sense now, I suppose. Casey doesn't get too much wrong, in fairness, does he?
No, and he didn't. Wasn't long about reminding the rest of us. After we slagged him in Thurles, the shoe was on the other foot in Gowran Park last Saturday.
And funny enough, Ruby, I really thought, despite the fact he was beaten a long way, Capodanno might be a horse to take out of this. Grand National, which we're going to be talking about later on in the show, the weights came out for that earlier this week. I thought Martin Greenwood was quite fair to him. Could he even, though, be a dark horse for the Gold Cup with this run behind him? Because Willie seemed keen enough to go down that road when I spoke to him afterwards.
He's always kind of held Capodanno in that regard, Gary. And I think if you look back to Punchestown last year when he won the 3 mile Grade 1 novice chase there, that is the way Willie Mullins was talking about Capodanno. He'd have to improve a bit. He will improve a bit. Could he be a Grand National horse? He could. But look, just looking at stats, and it's stuck in my head since I rode Rathvinden, every Grand National winner has run at least 3 times in the season they won the Grand National. Capodanno's only had the 1 run thus far.
Okay, and finally, just to come back to the Ryanair then, the last word on this for now. He might not be gone by then, in your view, just yet, Shishkin, but how do you see the picture overall for this one?
Look, I think he's the one everyone's going to have to beat. I think he's a very good horse. I think it's the right race for him. And look, I think he's unopposable. And look, some people would say, look, he won a point. Of course, he gets further. When you actually look at his point form, he beat Apple Rock and Vinnie Dev at Lingstown. One is rated 123 and the other is rated 110. So Shishkin was that superior to the opposition on that occasion. He didn't even have to stay, and he'd improved a hell of a lot from his first run, where he was beaten at Lisrona by Mr. Tickle and Neclair de Sablon, who are now rated 101 and 96. So no, I don't think he can look at his point form and say he'll stay. I think he's running the right race.
Okay, we will see him hopefully in a few weeks' time at Cheltenham. Shishkin is back with a bang. Okay, it's time for this week's social media poll. And the question for Road to Cheltenham devotees this week was, we gave you a list of 4 horses and asked which is the most likely to switch targets late in the piece for next month's Cheltenham Festival. Now, the 4 options were Blue Lord to the Ryanair, Conflated also to the Ryanair from the Gold Cup, Marie's Rock from the Mares to the Stayers, and Shishkin to the Gold Cup from the Ryanair. Now, Ruby, you've pretty much already nailed your colours to the mast about Shishkin, saying you feel he's going for the right race in the Ryanair. But how do you think this one might have played out?
Yeah, it's a difficult enough one. I don't know. Maria's Rock, obviously they're making sounds about her going to the Stayers, Gary, but she doesn't have any form at the trip. So that could be questionable. Blue Lord, there's Shishkin's performance last Saturday put Willie and Simon Munir Isaacs away off doing that with him. His best form is at 2 miles, arguably, although he did win the Clonmel Oil, so I'm not sure what he'll do. I actually thought maybe Conflated could be the one, but Gordon Elliott and Michael and Eddie O'Leary are pretty positive that they're going to go to the Gold Cup. I just thought with his run in last year's Ryanair, he was going to be second when he fell at the second last. And I think looking at the Grand National ratings, he's a 167 in the National. I think going through any second now, Martin Greenwood would have him a bit behind Gallup and Deschamps and a few more. So I thought he could be the one maybe, but connections say he won't be.
It does look that way. Well, I can tell you that it was Marie's Rock who came out on top in the poll with 37.4% of the viewers suggesting that she could go to the Stayers, just ahead of Blue Lord for the Ryanair with 35.5%, 14.6% for Shishkin to the Gold Cup. So lukewarm enough on that one, and Conflated to the Ryanair. I think Shishkin's performance on Saturday, if anybody was thinking along those lines, it maybe might have gone up in smoke after that. And in fairness, I don't think connections were really minded to change at that stage anyway. Just to go back to Marie's Rock, Ruby, it looks as though connections have always kind of had a little bit of a doubt in their mind about which is going to be the right race for her. Do you think she would get the 3? Okay, she's bred to get it, but she is a mare that can race quite enthusiastically. Could that maybe count against her chances of staying?
I think it would. And maybe I am ingrained in Big Bucks, English Dreamer, Barracuda, those type of horses that all raced behind the bridle and won Stayers hurdles. Now, Florian Porter is the flying the ointment. He's obviously a keen horse, but he got 2 wonderful rides in the front to win 2 Stayers hurdles. So to me, it would be a negative trying to really switch her off. Now, I know Nichols Canyon did step up, but he did switch off when he won a Stayers hurdle and had gone that way in his previous couple of runs. So I think it'll be hard enough for her.
Ability-wise, though, do you think she's right up there with some of the best of those?
I think she could be, but I think that's actually a better race than a lot of people seem to think it is. I think Home by the Lee to Hoopu, I think they're setting a pretty high standard myself. What do you think?
I think it's over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's just taken off that race, hasn't it? I thought it looked really weak. Florian Porter looks like he is going to make it now. He's been very strong in the betting the last few weeks. Blazing Cal has obviously rocketed to the top of the market. Yeah, but the French horse obviously won well at Cheltenham. As you say, it's all of a sudden looking a really strong race. But then the flip side is Honeysuckle's now going for the mares, and that's going to be a strong mares too. And this one's worth an awful lot more money than the mares as well. Could that maybe play a part?
I don't know. And she's already won 1 mares. Do you take a chance then after that? I don't know, Gary. But I was lucky enough to win plenty of mares hurdles at Cheltenham. But I do think I only rode one that would have won a championship race, and she did, and that was Annie Power. With the greatest respect to Vroom Vroom Mag, Honeysuckle, Quiviga, and Benny the Jew, I think had they stepped into the open company at Cheltenham, it's the wrong place in the winner's enclosure they might have been.
Okay. Could Marie's Rock then make an 11th hour move to the Stayers hurdle? Watch this space. Right, let's check out some of the top novice hurdle performances over the last week. And we're going to go back to Clonmel on last Thursday afternoon for the Sherholm Mercedes-Benz novice hurdle, which has been won by some smart horses over the years. You probably won't need me to remind you that Allaho beat Manila Indo in it a few years back before the form was reversed at the Cheltenham Festival. And it was a great result for Henry de Bromhead. He's got a terrific record in this race over the last few years. A 1-2, not in the order that many expected, with Hidden Valley Lake, the favourite, who was conceding weight all round, having to settle for second behind stable companion Monty Star. What's your feeling about this form, Ruby?
Yeah, I think it could be a pretty solid form, Gary, because the third horse, Search for Glory, had run really well at Leopardstown as well. But it was a funny kind of race. There was no real pace. Rachel Blackmore was forced to make it on Hidden Valley Lake. Sean Flanagan decided to follow her on Monty Star. He wasn't spectacular at the first now, Monty Star, but his jumping did get better after that. Jordan Gainford sat down the inside and searched for glory. So Sean and Jordan were watching the favourite right in front of them, which was Hidden Valley Lake. And you had two mares in the field then, right behind them, Calanisi Dove and Granny Lowry. Now, they were quite big in the betting, but they were always quite close to the front of the race. Now, the five of them were quite condensed all the way. Monty Star, he did race a bit keen at times. You can see him going to the second last in the second circuit. His head is in the air and he's taking a tug with Sean Flanagan, which isn't ideal for 3 mile racing. But even at the sixth last, the two mares are right behind the three geldings. And again, at the third last, they haven't gotten that far away from them. So this wasn't a stamina sapping contest. Hidden Valley Lake was clumsy at the third last, but the race only got going when they faced down to the second last. Monty Star came on the outside. Hidden Valley Lake was in the middle. Search for Glory down the inside. And Sean Flanagan's body language all the way down was much more confident. He was going much easier than Rachel or Jordan Gainford, and they pulled away from the two mares. Hidden Valley Lake grabbed at the second last hurdle. They were really trapping at it. It's downhill in Clonmel. But when he landed, he couldn't get back to Monty Star. Search for Glory did rally on the run to the last, but Monty Star was always doing enough and quickened away from the last hurdle. Now, put them on levels in the Albert Bartlett and most likely going a stronger gallop. Could I see Hidden Valley Lake turn around? I possibly could. Could you?
I could. And do you think they're going to be realistic, bona fide contenders for that race, the two of them? Henry obviously does particularly well with this type of horse. We're going to hear from him in just a second, actually.
I do. I think you look at Search for Glory's form, it ties in with Good Land at Embassy Gardens, and he ran the right race in that particular race to boost the form of Henry's two horses. So I do think they'll be players, yeah.
Okay, let's hear from the man himself then, Henry de Bromhead. As I say, he's got a terrific record in that Clonmel race. After the 1-2, he spoke to Kevin O'Ryan.
Thought they both ran really well. Monty's was good. Sean gave him a super ride. He just obviously he's quite immature, and so he decided to just follow away, and he toughed it out really well. In fact, the Maloney's were very keen to come to this race. They have a great record in it, and delighted for that.
Half brother Monaghan a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely, and got beaten within though. Yeah. So they were really keen to come, and delighted. Yeah.
Tactical Run Affair is what it looked like beforehand as well. It didn't suit any of the first three home, really, to be fair, did it? Yeah,
probably not, and I'd say Rachel just felt her lad struggled on the ground a bit, but he still ran really well and he toughed it out, and look, he's a very nice horse as well, so delighted with both of them.
Both horses are in the Albert Bartlett, all things being equal, both of them will still go there?
Yeah, I mean, it's subject to everyone wanting to do that. I couldn't see any reason not to. Can make Monaghan won it and was beaten in the Albert Bartlett, and Indo was second and won the. So yeah, you can make a case hopefully for both of them. So I'd be keen for them to go, and look, it's a blip for the other lad, but he's given away £6, and he still toughed it out and ran really well. So yeah, look. Delighted with both of them, to be honest.
Let's go to Haydock now for the Albert Bartlett Prestige Novice Hurdle. Obviously, the big talking point out of this race was the suspension for Lorcan Williams, who rode the winner, Making Your Mind Up, and also for Kevin Brogan. It was on the second collector's item. Lorcan Williams obviously going to miss the entire Cheltenham Festival, and I think Kevin Brogan misses out on the first day. But let's talk about the horses, Ruby. These two had a great scrap from the final flight home at Haydock. Where do they sit in the pecking order, do you think, among the staying novices?
I think on ratings, Gary, they both have to improve. But unlike the race at Clonmel, this was running a really good gallop. Well, it was early on anyway. And down to the first hurdle, Dr. Carnanga, St. Palais and Mr. Vango were bang up there. And they were going a really good gallop. Your first and second are both in purple colours just behind the pace. That's Making Your Mind Up and Collector's Item. They were in good positions. Now, the race did steady down in the home straight, and a couple of horses behind the front horses get keen. But the race picks up again on the second circuit to the 6th, 7th hurdle. They've jumped 6. St. Palais was the highest rated in the field, and he was in a good position at the 7th hurdle, but he made a mistake at the 8th. And he had a real step at it and was lucky to stay standing. And ultimately, he ended up on the floor in the end. But Lorcan Williams is on the inside, turning out the back straight. Kevin Brogan is just outside. I mean, you're kind of thinking, well, how is Lorcan going to get out of here? Because Kevin looked to have him in a right pocket as they rounded the bottom bend. In front was still Dr. Carnanga. St. Palais was outside him. Their first and second are just behind him. And Harry Skelton is actually behind again in the pink colours on the third horse. But Lorcan Williams did get himself out going to the third last hurdle, jumped it reasonably well. And then the race they set down to scrap it out to the second last. On the outside was a collector's item. In the middle was your winner, making your mind up. And St. Palais tips up at the last. And they get into a real ding-dong battle from their home. They both kept at it, but their ratings, Gary, probably aren't high enough to suggest that they're grade 1 novice hurdles. But maybe their ratings were a bit low. Maybe the handicapper was being kind to them. Only time will tell. Now, obviously, Lorcan and Kevin both got into trouble then for their use of the whip. Look, both have always, both of their careers have started with a restriction on the numbers of times you could use a whip. So both of them have learned to ride from the very beginning with numbers. So like coming down a number, that was always been part of the way they rode. Now the technical element of Lorcan bringing his hand a bit high, I think that one was introduced pretty quickly, too hastily actually. I think there should have been a 6-month lead in on that one myself, because you're basically asking a rider to completely change his or her swing. You wouldn't expect a golfer to change his or her swing in a month, but you're asking riders to change their swing within a month. I think that one should have had a 6-month lead in. Bringing down the numbers, well, they've all learned to ride with numbers, so bringing down the numbers shouldn't have been such a big issue.
And Ruby, there's been a lot of talk about how it's going to affect the Irish jockeys going over to Cheltenham. They didn't have the same betting in period, obviously, over here. Are you aware of any of those guys maybe trying to practice their technique ahead of Cheltenham, if you like, just to try and make sure they don't get into trouble?
Yeah, definitely. And even Paul Townend was actually asking me on Sunday, and I was watching it, and you came back to me to say, well, what did you think? And I said, I think 4 of them were okay, but one of them might have got you in trouble. So yeah, they are very aware of it, and they are making an effort. But unfortunately for them, Gary, it doesn't matter where you go in the world as a jockey. If you go, I went to ride in Japan. They didn't even recognize my license. I had to get a new license when I went to Japan and literally do a 1-day course to be allowed to ride. It took an hour, 1-day course, a bit over the top. But you have to, when you go anywhere in the world, ride to the rules of that country. If you go to France, you can only use it 5 times. A lot of the Irish jockeys were in Far Hills for the American Grand National this year, where they weren't allowed to use it at all. So, when you go to a different country, you have to ride to the rules of that country. It's not easy, but that's where you are. You are a visitor in a foreign jurisdiction, and you have to ride to the rules.
Right, we'll see how that one plays out next month. Let's have a final look at the Albert Bartlett betting. It's headed, Ruby, by a horse we haven't seen for a little while. He won at Thurles last time when you and I were working together, Embassy Gardens. It was the race Monkfish won en route to landing the Albert Bartlett. And I actually looked back at the form of Monkfish's win this morning. A Run Wild Fred fell 2 out when he was giving chase. It would have been vain chase. But outside of that, it was a terrible race. And it looked a pretty weak race on the day this time around as well. Would that put us off, or should it put us off Embassy Gardens at all, do you think?
I don't think so. I think he definitely improved markedly, Gary, for the step up in trip to 2 miles and 6. I think it was at Thurles, so was it nearly 2.7 and a bit, almost 3 miles. Stamina definitely is his forte. But I think he's made an hurdle run at Leopardstown. That's looking really strong. Good Land, Search for Glory, Embassy Gardens. That race is looking, and there was a lot of horses fancied on that occasion in Leopardstown. I think Tagman might have been second. He might have let the form down a bit since, but there's a lot of horses fancied in that maiden hurdle, and I think it's playing out.
Right, one more race to look at in this division from last week. It was on Thursday afternoon as well at Sandown. This was the Weatherby's Cheltenham Festival betting guide, Jane Seymour novice hurdle, and it was won by You Wear It Well. We did have an Irish rider in this, Deeply Superficial, who had some interesting form lines on this side of the Irish Sea for Gordon Elliott, but she was soundly beaten into third, Ruby. Were you taken by the winner's performance? I
was, because I think Deeply Superficial anyway had a good level of form going to the UK. Gavin Sheehan elected to make the run on You Wear It Well, and she bowled the way down to the first hurdle. It was quite look testing ground on the television anyway. Davy Russell sat second on Deeply Superficial. Now, he just about managed to get her settled. He's obviously a very talented rider. He has his hands buried in her neck, but you can see even landed at the second. He just about has her second and settled, and he sits right behind Gavin Sheehan to keep her switched off. Now, the interesting one is She's a Saint, who's back and forth in the black colours. She had dropped in early for Bridget Andrews. But when they turn down the hill away from the stands, she starts to go rush forward. I think they were going slow, but this filly bowls forward off the bend into the back straight and gets up to You Wear It Well in front, and then inserts a lot of pace into this race. So they did get quickening a long way from home. They both jumped the first hurdle in the back straight. I'm not sure what number it is right now. Just as she gets to it, she lands right behind You Wear It Well. And at the third one in the back straight, then she absolutely flew it and injected a lot of pace into it. Gavin Sheehan elected to follow Bridget Andrews straight away, and that put some of the other horses under pressure, because at the back of the third last, Davy is struggling on Deeply Superficial. He's going as fast as she can, and then Gavin Sheehan goes after Bridget Andrews off the home turn up to the second last hurdle. I thought it was a really good performance from You Wear It Well. I think Love Envoy won this race last year. Now, You Wear It Well looks like a real stayer to me. Obviously, the mare's novice at Cheltenham is back down a trip, but this mare stayed really well. And I thought the second, Gary, kept at it really well. She's a Saint. When you watched her going by the line, Bridget Andrews had to go a long way to pull her up. But I did think it was a good performance in the winner. I might be slightly worried coming back in trip, though.
She's round about fourth or fifth favourite, I think, for the Ryanair Jack de Bromhead Mare's Novice Hurdle at the Cheltenham Festival. Lucia is the market leader for that one, Ruby. I guess we could have had her in that poll earlier on for a potential switch as well, because the Supreme Novice has been mentioned as a possibility. What's your feeling on how that race is taking shape?
We could, Gary, and we could have included a half a dozen of Willie Mullins by the time he's finished swapping them around. So, yeah, look, Lucia, I think she's a solid favourite. But I think if Lucia was mine, I would be running in the Mare's Novice Hurdle, and that would probably annoy a lot of people. But fillies have too bad a record for my money in the Supreme. You've got to go back to Like a Butterfly to find the last female winner of it.
Okay, that is our wrap of last week's top novice hurdle performances. It's time now for Analyse This, and in this week's segment we're going to have a look at another typically well-judged ride from Danny Mullins in the Apples Jade Mare's Novice Hurdle at Punchestown on Sunday. The horse in question was Hauturier, trained by Willie Mullins. Ruby, take it away.
Yeah, and Hauturier, we could have put her in the same bracket as our last bit of footage, Gary, which was You Wear It Well, a staying mare. The Kilbury Warrior booked out in Punchestown with a really good gallop. Harmonia Maker, Ava Grace and Danny that elected to drop in at the back on Hauturier. You can see the stretch on this field already by the second hurdle. Now, Harmonia Maker unseated Jordan Gamefor at the third, but that didn't really change the shape of the race. And Danny, at the second last hurdle with circuit to go, is stone last and quite a long way off the ones in front. But he's just riding his own race and waiting for them to come back. The Kilbury Warrior does come back. First hurdle in the back straight on the second circuit. And Dennis O'Regan lands into the lead on She Could Be Anything of Gordon Elliott's. Ava Grace is in third. And Danny is still last on Hauturier and in no rush. He's following Rachel Blackmore in the red on Ryoko Choice. Fourth last hurdle, the field is starting to bunch up. And it's bunching because even though Dennis O'Regan's got to the front, he doesn't want to commit. He's slowed it down and Danny's on the back. He's watching everybody in front of him. Ryoko Choice in the red, he's stone last and he's allowing the race to develop. Now, She Could Be Anything pings the second last, and Dennis, when he gets onto the top of the hill, starts to let this really slide down into the straight and everyone has to chase. Rachel Blackmore gets a great run in the red colours between the two horses in blue to deliver her chance, and Danny has to swing right wide around the outside. But that didn't seem to bother Danny, because when he gets down into the straight, he keeps pulling with his left hand. He wanted to keep Hauturier to the middle of the track. We saw later on the ground on the meeting that the ground looked quicker on the outside. Danny stays wide, even though she jumps into her right at the last. He pulls her back out again to the left and gets up close home to win. A really well-timed ride, but I think finding the better ground as well, down the home straight, was key to Hauturier winning. Could I see her dropping back in trip for Mare's Novice? Not sure about that. She would end up on a handicap maybe.
We're going to concentrate now on the mares, looking at the Racing TV Covega Mares Hurdle at Punchestown on Wednesday. This is a race that can often have a bearing on the Mares Hurdle at the Cheltenham Festival, and this year's edition featured the return to the fray of Brandy Love, who was put in as favourite by bookmakers, but the market had a very different look by the time they jumped off, because Queen's Brook, who was best in at the weights on the official figures, was a well-supported market leader. And Ruby, she ran out a pretty authoritative winner in the end under what I know you felt was a really good ride from Jordan Gamefor.
Yeah, I think it was a really good ride, Gary. And it was an interesting race to watch. My Design booked out in front. Queen's Brook sat second and Brandy Love sat third in the Joe and Mary Donnelly colours. Anna Boonia was the other one of significance in there. And I suppose what you were watching in Brandy Love was how left would she go? Would she be keen, and how left would she go? And as the race developed, it was hard to tell from the side-on angle. Second hurdle, she looked to jump it really well, but you don't know how far out she's landing. But by the time she got to the fourth hurdle, when it was head-on, you could see. And she does go a little to her left, but nothing that you'd really be worried about, marginally to her left. But Jordan Gainford was in control of the race in second in the red cap. He allowed My Design to get far enough in front of him, and he kept everybody else where he wanted them to be. Up to the second last hurdle, then he moves up to challenge My Design. Paul Townend is going to cover that move, and Anna Boonia is coming behind as well to try and cover that. But Jordan, when he jumps to second last, he doesn't completely open her. He allows her to extend. Paul Townend has to cover the move then on Brandy Love. And when he gets onto Jordan's tail, Jordan sends this mare off the bend. She kind of stalled a little bit off the bend in Leopardstown on her last start. Jordan was ready for that, and he was in full crying her off the bend. But she went and attacked the last hurdle. Brandy Love missed it and out to her left. It was the one time she did go left. That was when she was under pressure, and Anna Boonia ran her down. But I think on ratings, Gary, Anna, or the winner, was entitled to win. She had a rating of 144, and she was getting £9 off the winner. So she was £7 well in. Anna Boonia was £6 well in with Brandy Love. So Brandy Love probably ran to her rating and even maybe ran a bit above it. And I know Willie Mullins thinks she'd improve a lot. Having said that, your winner, Queensbrook, was just denied in the Mayor's Hurdle last year. And I think they'll both be runners in what's going to be a very competitive Mayor's Hurdle.
Yes, 12 months ago, Queensbrook had finished second in this race before filling the same position at Cheltenham. Has she got a better chance this time around with the win behind her, or do you think the fact that it's maybe a stronger race would mitigate against that?
I don't know. I'd say Maria's Rock, when you look at it, set a pretty high standard, and she may or may not be in the race. You could have two champion hurdle winners in Honeysuckle and Epitante, but I don't know, they're not at the standard they were at when they were winning champion hurdles. You have She Wears a Well, Brandy Love, Echoes and Rain, and a few more. I've definitely forgotten one or two off the top of my head, but I think that'll be a really deep, strong race, that Mayor's Hurdle.
And I mentioned just at the top of this section that the return of Brandy Love obviously was one of the big talking points, and she was very much the main talking point from a social media reaction point of view to this as well. Mixed reaction, mind you. Ben Whiffen thought it was encouraging. He says, lovely prep for Brandy Love. Gary Blackwell says Brandy Love will surely overturn that form at Cheltenham. Was giving £9 going right-handed, which doesn't suit. Was first one of the season, so should come on for the run. 8-1 about Brandy Love and each way steal. Martin Lewis, after a long layoff, that will put Brandy spot on for next month. Willie found her the perfect pipe opener today. Sounds like Ruby agrees with you there, Martin. The money was down for a fully fit Queensbrook, and she didn't disappoint. Bradley L.A. says poor from Brandy, I should say. He takes a different view. All this nonsense about it will bring her on. Getting beat by Anna Belina. Won't be winning in March, Ruby. Poor jumping as well. Not sure you agree with that. Overall, do you think it was a positive return at the weights?
I do think it was a positive return at the weights, and I think she ran very close to 146, if not a bit more than that, on her first start this year. You would expect her to improve from it. She has to officially improve from it. But from me looking at it, it looks like the improvement is there. And I can't remember whose was the first tweet, Gary, that was suggesting 8-1 each way was a steal.
It was disagree. Gary Blackwell saying that.
Yeah, good man, Gary. I'd say you've nailed that one.
Okay, we'll find out next month whether Brandy Love will star in that Mayor's Hurdle at the Cheltenham Festival. We're going to talk now about some good 2 mile hurdlers who could have a say in some major prizes over the coming weeks and months. We're going to look first of all at the Red Mills Trial Hurdle at Gorham Park on Saturday. Sharjah was a warm favourite for this one. It was obviously a drop in class for him after contesting grade ones on, well, umpteen previous starts, really. He usually plies his trade at the top level, Sharjah. But Ruby, it didn't go according to plan. He made a bad mistake down the far side, just as he had done at Leopardstown previously, and in the end had to give best to Phil Dorr. How costly was that error, do you feel?
Very much so. But it's a good performance from Phil Dorr, Gary, who went to the first hurdle and attacked it. Even for a horse who'd been running over fences, he went and jumped, and he got low by the time he got to the second hurdle. Now, Sharjah was probably a little bit alive in Patrick's hands through the early part of the race, and Dr. Bravo the novice sat right behind his stable companion, but the mistake in the middle hurdle in the back straight can't have been a help. It was a really bad mistake. Fieldor and Dr. Bravo didn't allow him back into it either. Patrick had to, they didn't slow down, so Patrick had to go after him a little bit to catch up on him. The Capo Glory was with them. Dr. Bravo joined Fieldor down to the third last and out jumped him for a novice Gary that was really taking him at his run, but he misses the second last. Patrick switches outside on Sharjah to come and deliver his challenge, but he can't get by Fieldor, who really grounded out and kept at it. Sharjah, maybe on real testing ground, has he ever run his best race in February time? I wouldn't be so sure he has. But on gluey ground, it definitely didn't suit him. But I thought Fieldor was good. He was tough. Where does he go from here? Maybe entry? I don't know. But I thought the novice, Gary, took my eye. Did he take yours?
We're seeing from the same hymn sheet. I thought he was a big eye catcher. To be honest, I thought going to 2 out until he made that error, he looked the likely winner. And given his inexperience, it was a huge run. Now, he is in the Supreme Novices, and I gather there is a chance he could turn up there. Could he potentially be a lively outsider for that?
I'm sure he could. I mean, Fieldor and Sharjah set a pretty good standard. Would you think either of those would run into money in the Supreme? I'd have to think you would. And that puts Dr. Bravo bang there. I mean, you're going to steal Lydia's glory and stick him up there as an each-way bet?
I don't know whether I'd go that far. I've actually backed one in already, so that would probably be a bit naughty, but maybe something later on in the show. Ilete Tomp is the one I've backed so far. I just thought he was very impressive. Leopardstown last time, I thought it was probably the best performance of a 2 mile novice hurdler this season. All the talk was about Facile Vega afterwards, but I don't know. I thought there was plenty to like about that.
You can see through the wood and see the trees.
Okay, that was the Red Mills trial hurdle. We'll move on to the Kingwell hurdle at Wincanton. And there was no hiding place in this one, Ribby, was there? I like to move it. In the end, ran out a really decisive winner of this. Just how highly would you rate the performance?
I know it's Wincanton, but I thought it was a really good performance, Gary. When they rocked up to the first hurdle, Nappers Hill was flying. Global Citizen beside him, first street, and I like to move it back third and fourth. But they were doing 34, 35 miles an hour. Round the bend past the stands, there was no slowing down. They did steady it fractionally in the back stretch, but not enough for Global Citizen in first street. First hurdle in the back straight, James Bowman, he lands here, has to squeeze first street. These were trapping every step of the way. Third last hurdle even they're coming to now. And when they land here, Global Citizen in first street, they just can't keep up. Nappers Hill hadn't slowed down. Briney sent them across the bottom, again up to 35 miles an hour. But I like to move it, was going really easy on his outside and just moves up off the horn turn and brushes Nappers Hill out of the way. I thought this was really good from my like to move it. First Street and Global Citizen, they keep plugging on. But the further they were going, the further I like to move it was going to win. Now, some people may question his jumping, Gary, but I thought this, I know it's 1 mile and 7 furlongs and Wincanton is a fast track, but this horse clocked great speeds, a really good time for the majority of the race. And I thought there was something in it. What did you think?
There was absolutely nothing not to like about it. I was really taken by him, and he's round about 16 to 1 for the champion hurdle now, which puts him in as fourth favourite. That said, I think that's about right. If you ask me where he's going to finish in the champion hurdle, I'd say fourth is probably the most likely. I just don't see him getting in amongst the top three. What about you?
I think he could, and a lot of people will be wondering what's going to finish third. You've obviously had Constitution Hill and Statement, and then it's Vauban or maybe one of the mayors, but I think that was a really taking performance, and I won't be surprised if he's third in the champion hurdle.
I like to move it then. Potentially a champion hurdle contender. We're turning now to the bumper scene, and as per usual this season, Willie Mullins has really been struggling to find good bumper horses, but luckily enough for him at Punchestown on Sunday, a horse called Ballyburn reared his head, a point-to-point winner previously for Colin McKeever, who made a winning start under rules in what looked a fair race, Ruby. You and I were working together on Sunday. I know you liked the horse going into the race. Do you like him even more now?
I do, and I thought it was a good performance, Gary. Quantum Storm in the Bective stud colours was good and handy under Jamie Codd, but Ballyburn didn't give Patrick Mullins an easy time of it, and he was quite keen with his head absolutely buried on the floor, and he tugged and dragged and pulled Patrick for the best part of a mile and a half here. You did have good form in there. Irish Panther was the form horse in the Sean and Bernadine Mulrine colours, navy with the red cap, about 6th, 7th or 8th on the inside there. He was second to Factifile at Leopardstown over Christmas, over 2.5 miles. So he did bring a good level of form here. You can see in the back straight, Ballyburn still hadn't settled. And when they got up to turn into the home straight, Jamie Codd even had dictated an even gallop in front on Quantum Storm. But he doesn't open up and sprint off the bend. He starts to build this. So he's dragging the 2 horses behind him, but he's building it, and he allows himself to get well into the home straight before he opens Quantum Storm up. I thought he'd done enough to win the race, Jamie, actually. But when the penny drops at Ballyburn inside the furlong pole, he starts to take off and gets running for Patrick in the Ronnie Bartlett colours, part owned by David Manasseh as well. And he gets running halfway up the run-in. And the further he went, the better he looked, Ballyburn. I think it's solid form to pull well clear of the remainder. As I said, Irish Panther, he had good form coming here. So I think Ballyburn was good, Gary.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, to me, there was plenty that went wrong for him there. And as you say, it looked a decent race on paper beforehand with Irish Panther having that good run at Leopardstown. He'd just about be top of my list now, to be honest, for the Cheltenham bumper. Obviously, Willie, I was jesting just in case anyone wasn't aware at the top of this piece that he's short on bumper horses. He's got them just about here, there and everywhere this season, as per usual. It's, for me, is the favourite, Ruby. A little bit of time has passed since we saw him win at Navan. We can just refresh our memories about that performance. It was, in terms of the impression, it was more, I suppose, eye-catching, breathtaking, whatever way you want to put it, than what Ballyburn did. But to me, there's every bit as much substance to the form of Ballyburn than there is to him. What about you?
I probably agree, Gary. And Come On Archie made the running in this race. Patrick sat up on the outside niche for me in the Simon Munir Isaacs away colours. They didn't go a mad gallop. At the back, in the orange with the white cap, is Sutton's Hill. And he's going to eventually finish second in this race, Gary. He got well beaten in the maiden hurdle yesterday at Punchestown. So, look, form, who knows? But it's what he did on the second circuit. It's for me. And it was the impression from here down the straight that he gives. Patrick doesn't really ever move on this horse. Yet he just seems to go faster and faster himself. And it meets the downhill and Patrick gets out a bit of rain. He just starts to open up. Gary, it was visually very impressive. He had been working quite well at home. Now, what will he do when you open him up? I don't know. You're hoping he'll take off. But not every horse does take off and they get a squeeze. But you'd be hoping this fella will take off. But as you said, I'm not sure about the form. What do you make of it?
I'd be slightly sceptical. The second horse was beaten over hurdles the other day. I wouldn't read too much into that. He beat him all ends up. But if you offer me a choice, particularly at the prices now, Ballyburn is over twice the price. No contest for me. I'll definitely be with Ballyburn.
Maths. It's all about maths, isn't it?
No, not all about maths. I think, do you know what? Even if they were the same price, I think I'd nearly be Ballyburn as well.
Then you're definitely Ballyburn because they're not.
Exactly.
What did you make? I thought the horse on Saturday, though, Gordon, was equally as good.
Yes, this is a filly called Brighter Days Ahead. There's a fair few horses with similar sort of names around. We've got a Better Days Ahead, a Better Times Ahead. This is Brighter Days Ahead, owned by Jigginstown, trained by Gordon Elliott. Harry Swan was in the plate. Very well related filly, half-sister to Mighty Potter and French Dynamite, amongst others. I don't know, did the race maybe fall apart a little bit? Ruby Willie's horse actually ended up pulling up. Something presumably went to miss, but you were taken by this one, weren't you?
I was. Only a 4-year-old filly in against older horses, Gary, and these horses with quite similar names. I wonder will they end up as good as Brave Man's Game, Gentleman's Game, Madman's Game. I wonder will these Better Days, Brighter Days, and whatever the other one is called, I wonder will they all end up as good. But I was impressed with Brighter Days Ahead. Harry Swan rode her, 4-year-old filly in against older horses. Patrick's in the Ritchie colours, or Susanna Ritchie colours. Comes down the hill behind him, but Iris Emery doesn't pick up. Vicky Victoria and Ascending Lark are the 2 horses either side, but for a 4-year-old filly, I know she only had 10-6, but it's the manner in what she does here, Gary. Harry Swan just starts to give her a squeeze and changes his hands, and this filly opened up and went away and was visually the most impressive winner on the card at Gowran last Saturday.
She's a double-figure price for Cheltenham. The owners obviously haven't always been great fans of the Cheltenham race, and as Ruby said, she's only a 4-year-old filly. Some people have mentioned Aintree as a possibility, Mare's bumper there, but Ruby, I gather the George Myrna Memorial, the Tattersalls bumper at Ferryhouse at Easter could be her target. That's $100,000 race, comes just before Aintree. It does, to be honest, look a bit of a no-brainer to head that way, doesn't it?
It probably would. She was obviously sold at Tattersalls at some stage, so she qualifies for the race, and it's a huge pot, and yeah, I could see why they'd be going there. I would too.
Better days ahead, better times ahead, brighter days ahead. They're all pretty good.
Ruby, what horse gave you the biggest wow performance of your career, and what was the biggest wow performance by a horse you were riding against?
Oh, that I rode, probably masterminded in the champion chase as a 5-year-old to win as far as he did, but to have won as far from home as he had won, that was incredible. And that I rode against a long time ago, probably the first time, and I didn't ride against him too often, but I rode against Istabrak one day in Tipperary, and he passed me middleweight down the back straight, and it was like when a truck or a bus passes you on the motorway and you get that speed wobble from the power of it going by you. He was an incredible horse, Istabrak.
And to watch that Paddy Power clip in full, check out the Paddy Power Racing YouTube channel. Okay, we resume with some Grand National chat. Big news emerging this week as the weights were unveiled in Liverpool on Tuesday afternoon. Just prior to that, in fact, of the retirement of the former winner Minella Times, who has found life rather difficult, like so many Grand National winners, following that famous victory a couple of years ago under Rachel Blackmore. Ruby, it did prompt plenty of, I suppose, reminiscing about a wonderful day, not just for horse racing, but really for sport in general. Just take us back to that afternoon. It was a real shame, obviously, that it didn't take place in front of a massive crowd, but just how significant was that day?
I think it was a huge day, Gary, and it's a day that will have enormity for a very long time. And it was, look, more than the horse was marvellous. Henry the Brownhead was a spectacular training performance, but for Rachel Blackmore to become the first lady to win a Grand National, that will forever be history. And Minella Times was the horse that provided that win for her. It was a huge day for the sport. And you're always looking for an occasion, an event, a day that takes horse racing into the mainstream media. And by God, that did that.
And one thing you can absolutely guarantee is that Minella Times will have a wonderful retirement. We just heard, obviously, in the last week or two of the passing of Barracuda, and more recently, You'll Never Walk Alone, two fabulous horses that JP McManus owned, and they lived to a great age. They'll want for nothing, or Minella Times will certainly want for nothing in his retirement, really, that's for sure.
There's plenty of us would love a retirement like they're going to get.
Maybe we can look forward to that one day. Who knows? Let's have a look at some Grand National trials then. And we're going to go to Haydock, first of all, for their big race on Saturday afternoon. This was the Betfred Grand National trial. And it was won by the mare Quick Wave, who had disappointed when well fancied for the Coral Welsh National at Chepstow previously, but bounced back in spectacular fashion. Ruby, it was a good scrap with Snow Leopard Des. Would you take a positive view of the form overall?
I would, Gary, and I thought Cloudy Glen ran really well as well. He jumped out in front, good enough size field, and obviously it was Bristol Demise last run here as well, Gary, and he bowed out after this. A wonderful servant he has been as well. But Quick Wave was in a good position early. She's low and quick over her fences, which would look ideal for Aintree the way it is now. But the one worry you'd have with her is she did lose her position early in the race. She got herself quite far back in the field. So you'd be kind of thinking, if she hadn't the pace in Haydock, will she have the pace at Aintree? But good jumping got her back into the race. So lots of jumping for her in Aintree. Cloudy Glen, on his first run for a long time, put up a bold show, and Snow Leopardess always runs her normal race. Now, three of them to the third last fence, and it was going to go anyway. Cloudy Glen, obviously off the track for over 380 days. He cries enough fitness-wise. Snow Leopardess keeps at it. And Quick Wave does the one thing you have to do now to win a Grand National, and that's stay. Since the modifications, no loose horses, stamina has really come to the fore in the Grand National, and this mare stays forever. And she's low and sleek. If she can just hold a half-decent position. Now, I know Noble Yates came from last in last year's Grand National, but there's a big difference in starting somewhere and making up ground than starting in the position, losing the ground, and then trying to make it up.
And on Sunday, we had the Quinbec Grand National Trial at Punchestown. Hedgehunter back in the day won this off bottom weight before going on to win the Grand National a couple of seasons later. On this occasion, it was the man who rode Hedgehunter that day, Sam Curling, who sent out the well-backed favourite Angel's Dawn. But alas for her supporters, and yes, I was one of them, she departed two from home. When seemingly going well, Ruby, we don't know what would have happened, but that's to take nothing away from the winner, Cocoa Beach. It was good to see him back in the number one spot. Really likeable horse, and a big day as well for his jockey Ben Harvey.
Yeah, it was a big day from Gary, and it was a messy enough start. And Cocoa Beach, who is habitually a front runner, actually missed the break and ended up behind the pace. Stones and Roses and Captain Kangaroo got a flyer, and Cocoa Beach ended up just in front of mid-division. Not as big a field as there was in Haydock, but Cocoa Beach is a brilliant jumper. He must be some thrill to ride. Watch him here at the second fence. He goes from 5th or 6th even into 4th with a great jump. And again at the bottom of the hill at the ditch. I'm really sure it's a ditch. But this is a dream for a horse to ride. And I'm sure Ben Harvey had a great trail on him. He's a wonderful jumper, Cocoa Beach. Now, again, away from the stands, this is the second fence in the second circuit. He's just always getting ground in the air. Now, this race had plenty of drama. Captain Kangaroo, he fell at the 13th fence in front. The 15th fence then, the old Kerr, who'd looked unlucky at the Paddy Power, he makes a really bad mistake in about mid-division in the first Jiggestown colours, goes from 4th or 5th back to 9th or 10th. They got around to the third last fence, and Debt Duty, who was in the Jiggestown blue cap, he threw away his chance when he missed the third last fence under Michael O'Sullivan. And then you got to the second last, and Gary, your dreams went up in smoke. Well, Angels down and seated Keen Quirk. She did look to be going particularly well at this stage, but she'll have another day. And that left it to Cocoa Beach, who had never missed a beat, jumped like a buck, and kept going best to beat Debt Duty. Jumping suits him. Maybe now I don't know, maybe it was by design that he hadn't made the run last Sunday, but he had made it in the Tayestes prior to that. Maybe now with a change of tactics, given a little bit more time to get on his feet early in the Grand National, he could jump his way into contention and run a better race than he did last year.
Yes, it does look as though he's going to be at Aintree Bend once again, Cocoa Beach, and I'm sure he'll give a good account of himself there, which brings us on nicely, Ruby, to the weights launch earlier this week, and Martin Greenwood unveiling his various different calculations. I know you were there at the lunch. Your father probably didn't enjoy his lunch too much when he found out what any second now had been handed. Overall, how do you see the picture now? Has anything maybe risen or fallen in your calculations?
I'd say Ted couldn't even eat lunch thinking about it, let alone enjoy his lunch. He wasn't in England anyway. But look, what did I think about it? Look, obviously there's the 3 joint top weights in any second now, Hewick and Conflated. And mathematically, it is easy to see how the handicappers have any second now and Hewick on the mark that they have. They've both achieved that through penalties in handicap races, whereas Conflated has the same mark, but he's a dual Grade 1 winner. I do believe there's a difference. I do believe the graded form will trump the handicap form. I think you look at a couple of horses through the year, through this year even, for examples. I think you look at Royal Rendezvous in handicaps, how he can compete, and you watch him in the graded races, how he can't. And I think when you look at Frodon, when he was dropped to 158, he won at Wincanton. Now, he got a £4 penalty for winning. I don't think he should have, because he went and ran into King George and ran to about 156, 157 in the King George. I actually think he was on the right mark at 158, and I would be for dropping horses quicker rather than always raising the winners. I would be for dropping them. And look, that's the way I see it. I do think of the top 3, you would have to think Conflated is the best in. Maybe Hewick is still improving. He could be the one that goes and proves it, but any second now, he split Fury Road and Franco de Port in the Irish Gold Cup. And I think if Conflated ran in that race, he would have been well ahead of him.
So the weights are out. No penalties apply from here. We could have some further Grand National clues this weekend. That's coming up next here on Road to Cheltenham. Let's look ahead then to this weekend and the Bobby Joe Chase at Fairyhouse, a race that can often be a good stepping stone to the Grand National at Aintree. Any second now, very nearly pulled off the double last year. Of course, Hedge Hunter has done it in the past. Ruby, this year's edition, we've got the decks through, and it's an interesting lineup. We've got my long-term Grand National fancy in there, Longhouse Poet. Ken Boy is in there, and another very interesting runner, obviously the Thyestes winner, Carefully Selected.
Yeah, it will be a good race. Obviously, Ken Boy coming down in grey. Gary, Carefully Selected, will be getting his third run, which I think will be key to winning a Grand National for him. And he was quite good in the Thyestes. He beat Dunboyne, Pencil Full of Lead, and Cocoa Beach, who was 4th, has gone and won the national trial in Punchestown since. I think the other one of interest could be Vanilla. I thought he was travelling really well in the Paddy Power when he fell. Good horse in his day, and Gavin Cromwell's yard are in really good form.
Gordon Elliott's well represented also with the likes of Farclas and Pencil Full of Lead. A few people picked him out as a potential Grand National candidate when the weights come out. Can you see the case? Ran quite well in the Thyestes.
Yeah, I could definitely see the case. And he's a lightly raced horse. He's not young, he's lightly raced, so he could be. And yeah, he's definitely one. There's also one other horse, Gary, I know you wanted to pick up on him. We didn't get time to show clip footage of him, but if Gavin Cromwell, the one in Sandown last week, stumped him, mightn't be a Grand National horse, but
Absolutely, yeah. Not going to be a Grand National horse this year, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility of him running in it further down the line. I was really impressed by him when he won at Sandown last week, Ruby. It looked an interesting choice of target for him, but all became clear afterwards in Johnny Burke's interview with Tom Stanley, I think it was, when he revealed that the Kim Muir is the long-term objective and he needed to run and go up the weights to make sure he got into that race. I'm not sure whether Gavin Cromwell has booked a jockey or not yet. Derek O'Connor rides from a bit. He's got a good 7-10 claimer in the yard, Joe Dunn. But did you like what you saw from him?
I did, and I just was thinking the same, who'd ride him, because whoever does ride him is in for some thrill. I watched him.
Brilliant
Johnny,
down the back, wasn't he?
He was spectacular, so he was. Fences 13 to 15, the 3 side on from the grandstand. God, there were 3 brilliant jumps. And even at the ditch in front of the stands, when Johnny gave him a squeeze and he changed his mind, he was really good stump down. So some amateur is going to have fun on him in the Kim Muir if he gets in. I think there's good racing in Ace, Gary. Obviously, the Newlands chase, we don't have declarations for that, but is it a last chance saloon for Shishkin Pursois?
Well, you tell me. Has he been since we saw him last? He probably hasn't done a whole lot, I'd imagine, since Thurles, has he?
No, he's still going. Obviously, in there against Course Sublime. So, interesting to see how he gets on and where would he go at the Cheltenham Festival. Grand Annual? Hardly see Willie Mullins dropping into a handicap, could you?
Colin Games is a fascinating entry for that. I was reading Gordon Elliott's comments there in the paper the other day. I think he mentioned he's had a wind up since we saw him last. Obviously, big ask for him as a novice taking on the likes of Shishkin Pursois. But if he were to line up, it would just potentially make it that bit more informative, wouldn't it?
It most certainly would. And I thought the other one in similar colours that'll be interesting on Sunday was Found at 50 in the Johnstown novice hurdle. I thought he was really good at Fairy House when he beat Parmignon with a really strong gallop that day, and I think he'd be an interesting runner in that race. There's a couple of novice races in Kempton as well, obviously, the Dove Cot and the Pendle, Boot Hill. I think John Bond fans will be hoping he can get back on the winning track and boost John Bond's form.
Yes, just come back to that Johnstown novice hurdle on Sunday. 2013 wasn't a bad edition of that race, Ruby, was it? Annie Power winning it, Don Cossack, subsequent Gold Cup winner in third. Neither of them ran at Cheltenham that year, but they didn't do too badly afterwards, did they? No, they didn't. There was no mayor's novice hurdle in Cheltenham that time, Gary. So Annie Power went to the Johnstown and on to Fairy House for the Grade 1 is the way she went. Where that now, she probably would have gone to Cheltenham for the mayor's novice hurdle, but hey, who knows how she'd have got on. And as you said to me, classic Emmett Mullins, Corbett's Cross has entered this over 2 miles when he was due to run over 3 miles the other day in testing ground at Clonmel. What to make of that? I think he's hell-bent on not running them in the Albert Bartlett since I put him up as a tip. Okay, maybe we will see Corbett's Cross at Naas on Sunday. That's where we got to leave it. Ruby, thanks very much. As ever, Gary. It's been a pleasure, and rest assured Lydia will be back next week. I think you've got some handicap weights to dissect, haven't you, next week's show? I think Lydia will have handicap weights to dissect next week. Willie will have a few entries in those, you can guarantee as well. Thanks for watching Road to Cheltenham, guys. Bye-bye.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.